If you grew up in the 2000s or early 2010s, chances are you might have heard of a little show called Degrassi. It was a long-running teen drama show that aired on CTV in Canada, the N in America, or if you're where I am, ABC Kids and ABC3 in Australia. It centered around an ensemble cast of teenagers attending the fictional namesake school, and it wasn't afraid to tackle not only the usual bread and butter teenage issues in a painfully realistic manner, but even the darker, crueler aspects of teenage life, and life in general. And it's because of this that it has proved to be an enduring entry of the teen drama genre, setting it apart from the flashier, less realistic series like Beverly Hills 90210, Gossip Girl, and Pretty Little Liars. The show also spawned two particularly well-known figures in the entertainment industry, Aubrey Drake Graham and Nina Dobrev. However, you might not know that Degrassi's history doesn't start in 2001. It started in 1980. Degrassi has been a Canadian institution for over 40 years, starting with the show The Kids of Degrassi Street, which ran from 1980 to 1986, and in 1987 came Degrassi Junior High. Degrassi Junior High was the true beginning of Degrassi. It was critically acclaimed when it came out for being a show that tackled teenage life in a painfully realistic manner, as compared to American sitcoms and dramas like Family Ties and Our House. Several of its characters became Canadian cultural icons, and one of them would prove to be influential on the future of the franchise. This is Christine Spike Nelson. This punk-style girl had sex with Shane McKay at Lucy's party, leading to a chain of events that quite literally led to the existence of Degrassi: The Next Generation. We saw Spike get scrutinized for her pregnancy, get kicked out of school, struggle as an unwed teen mother, and later deal with her teenage daughter. She was arguably the most crucial character of the franchise, except she was a side character. In fact, not just a side character, but in my opinion, sideline. When I first got into Degrassi, and by the way I watched Junior High first, Spike was the first character I really noticed and paid attention to. I mean, how could you not with that awesome hair? But the further and further I delved in, it didn't seem like she had that big of a role. She had some prominent storylines, but it felt like there was a wasted opportunity. Spike is a character that I genuinely see as having had potential to be something more than what she was. This video is also going to address a few common criticisms of the character, as well as a couple minor scenes in detail. There aren't much Degrassi videos like this out there, but there are a few channels who have made or are dedicated to doing this, and the channels that I list here served as inspirations for this video. And as far as I know, there's nothing on Spike, at least a standalone analysis, review, discussion, so this might technically be the first. I get why others would not think there's much to write about because of what I just said before, but that's not the point. Now, warning, this video is gonna mention various sensitive topics such as drug abuse, mental health, sexual abuse, and suicide. So in each section, I'll add a trigger warning in the title cards. So sit back, relax, and come with me down the rabbit hole that is Christine Spike Nelson from Degrassi. The year is 1970. The Vietnam War is raging, America's in massive turmoil, the Beatles break up, and Amanda Steptoe was born in Montreal, Quebec. But the birth of Spike as we know it today came on August 23rd, 1981 at Oakville, Ontario. It was here that an 11-year-old Amanda Steptoe was first exposed to punk when she attended a massive gig by the British new wave band The Police that included several well-known bands, artists, and local musicians. She recalled how she saw the punks in the audience and was blown away by their styles and how she was immediately hooked on the genre.
Seeing the crowd and just seeing the interaction and just the music, I was hooked.
Not long after, one more piece of the puzzle would come together when Amanda began to do her hair in spikes. Of course, the exact year's never been said, but in this 1988 interview, she said...
I've been doing it for 4 years.
In this 1992 interview, she said...
8 years.
So let's assume that this was 1984. Sometime in the mid-80s, Amanda started going to the Etobicoke School of the Arts, which would become a crucial place, as this is where she would come across an audition for a TV show that read, "No experience necessary." One issue with having no experience though, she had no professional headshots or promo photos. So like other cast members, she was told to send in a regular old photo instead. For the photo, Amanda's parents didn't want her hair to be Spike. They thought that she wouldn't get on television with such a unique, outrageous hairstyle.
I was like, why? I don't think you should wear your hair up. I think you should wear your hair normal. Right? And of course, already with my attitude, I'm like, fuck them. If they don't want my hair, fuck them. Because I'm not changing who I am, just the surly teenager that you would typically come across. And
Not long after that, she was accepted and she underwent the first of many acting workshops. Initially auditioning for Stephanie K, a provocatively dressed girl who serves as the eye candy for the male population of Degrassi, Amanda's hairstyle and fashion captivated the producers, and Linda Scarlett, Degrassi's co-creator, will recall going, "My god, that girl isn't Stephanie K, but we need her on our show!" And so the role was specifically created for Amanda. She was then subsequently christened Spike by Neil Hope, who played Wheels, a character who went down a pretty dark path that I may or may not explore in his own video. The character of Spike was built from research on teenage pregnancy data. The woman behind the research was Loretta Castellari, who co-authored a book based on the character. The research involved the latest published material about the subject, interviewing professors in the field, and even interviewing actual teenagers going through it. Originally, Stephanie K was going to be the pregnant girl, but in an act arguably ahead of its time, they didn't do it because Stephanie dressed provocatively. They didn't want to insinuate that it was only the promiscuous girls who got pregnant. Aka, they avoided slut shaming. They chose Spike because she was a nice, quiet girl everyone liked, and wouldn't be expected to fall to such a fate. And in fact, her story would actually hit home for Amanda. As in a Montreal Gazette interview, she would say how playing the role felt like being in the shoes of her biological mother, and that it helped her forgive her. As for the character's personality, Amanda Steptoe herself described it as such. I would describe Spike as a young teenage mum who's mixed up and confused. She feels alone because every guy she's dealt with has hurt her in some way. People will probably think she's crabby, but she's just insecure. And so, with all this being said, a character was born. The story of Spike begins, but not really. You see, Spike wasn't even a character for most of the first season. I mean, she's in the background quite a lot, perhaps maybe a little bit too prominent for an extra, as if they were anticipating something. Yeah. Spike had no lines until the 8th episode.
Duncan Street? Where's that?
But on April 5th, 1987, or on March 29th, 1987, whenever the hell it aired, the most crucial episode of Degrassi history graced TV screens across Canada. It's late. This is the episode where Spike has unprotected sex with her boyfriend Shane McKay, and in the process sets the stage for the entire direction of the franchise moving forward. As this podcast puts it, the Rolls Royce of Degrassi episodes. The two screws, Spike realizes her period's late, and
I'm pregnant.
from here on, Spike is indecisive about what she wants to do with the baby. She brings up abortion, but Shane shuts that down. She then brings up adoption, but later decides against that. And it's here on this staircase that Spike says,
I'm just a kid. It was just a little mistake.
yeah, bet you didn't know that. Now the comments section can be like, oh, blame Banshee on TikTok. Back to the important shit. Shane is at first in denial and begins to ask questions such as,
It wouldn't be the guy's problem, right?
this denial begins to piss Spike off, and her attempts at trying to make him realize the reality of the situation piss him off too, and they break up. By the start of the second season, Spike seems to have decided to keep the baby, although she tells her friends,
I don't know, I keep changing my mind.
and she wants nothing to do with Shane, who hasn't even told his parents about this shit yet. In counseling, she is given an egg to take care of as if it were a baby, a plotline inspired by a real Toronto experiment at the time, and Shane wants to help. Spike tells him to basically screw off before relenting and giving Shane the egg, for which he is mercilessly mocked. Lucy Fernandez announces everyone is invited to another one of her epic parties, and Spike decides that to be fair, she'll go to the party while Shane takes care of the egg. However, Shane goes to the party and brings the egg along with him, and shit goes absolutely sideways when Joey grabs the egg and begins playing catch with everyone else in the room. Shane gets a hold of it, then succumbs to peer pressure and then joins in, and Spike has enough and leaves. Outside, she kills Egbert and rips Shane a new one for being untrustworthy and only wanting to help because of his guilt, not because he truly meant it. Shane tells his ancient fossils of parents who then want to talk with Spike and her mum over a dinner. At the dinner, which consists 50% of Shane's mum glaring at Spike like a pile of dog shit, they try and push for Spike to be in a group home and Shane in a private school. But Shane sticks up for Spike and for himself, and the two reconcile briefly. A few episodes later, we notice that the PTA is campaigning for a removal from the school, claiming she sets a bad example. Caitlin Ryan, an overzealous activist and aspiring journalist, sees this and tries to speak out against it by attempting to publish a piece decrying the situation in the school newspaper, and then when she was rejected because of bias, spread the piece around herself. Unfortunately, instead of taking one step forward for Spike, Caitlin has shoved a million steps back when Spike calls her out for broadcasting her pregnancy to the whole school, and she gets a shitload of detention. Spike is then officially booted out of Degrassi. Really, her absence lasts for a grand total of 1 episode, and in that episode you can actually see her in an exterior shot of the school. Yeah, bet you didn't know that one. Anyway, Spike comes back for exams and then later the school dance in which she goes to labor. In the 3rd season, Shane was fucked off to summer camp by his parents, and Spike is at her most pissed off with Shane because yet again, he wasn't there. And she tells him to essentially fuck off. However, Shane starts offering her child support, which while warming her up a little towards Shane again.
You're really tired.
I feel like such a wreck. Emma cried and cried all night.
It hasn't alleviated her reservations towards him, as when her babysitter flakes one day, Emma is brought to school and Spike doesn't want her near Shane. Shane begs though, and she relents. Aw, too bad this won't last. Shane and Spike appear to be at least a little cool with each other until Shane's buddy Luke Matthews convinces him to use the payment to go to a concert instead. And he pretends to Spike that he's broke, but she finds out the truth from Liz and calls him out on it, especially if she was going to go to the concert so she could for once do something like a normal goddamn 15-year-old. And to which Shane responds,
You know, you're lucky I'm nice. Lots of guys wouldn't give you anything.
Shane is then convinced by Luke to try acid, and he falls off a bridge and straight into a coma. At this point, Spike is struggling being a mum, and now without child support and the babysitter who fucked off to Vancouver, she tries to find a job where a greasy man with bald hair takes shots at her hairstyle and doesn't hire her. Fuckwit. And because of the writer's boner was sidelining Spike, we never do see if she got a job or not. By the end of the 3rd season, Spike is at a breaking point. Raising a baby, having no source of income, and her grades are low. So when Miss Avery comes in with her disastrous grades and says she has to go into correspondence courses, Spike does what any other 15-year-old mother whose life is falling apart around her would do. Complain. Or at least she sorta does before Avery barks.
You count your blessings, young lady. At least you can have a baby. Not all of us are that lucky, you know.
Look, you may have gotten pregnant at 14, got kicked out of school over it, continue to struggle with raising a kid on peanuts, but at least you can have a baby, so shut up! I have some words about this scene and I'm gonna save that for a later part of the video. For some reason, Spike accepts this as just how it is and agrees to the correspondence courses, moments before the school burns down. And that was Spike's story in Degrassi Junior High. You think this is huge? We're not done. New year, new look, new Spike. Having probably done her correspondence courses by now, Spike is back in town at Degrassi High, and there's conveniently a daycare right near the school that Emma can go to. When Erica Farrell gets pregnant after a fling with a camp counselor over the summer, she contemplates abortion, which her twin sister Heather disagrees with her over. And so, pretending Erica is someone else, Heather asks Spike about the situation, to which he says that abortion was wrong for her, didn't mean it was wrong for someone else. After Erica has the abortion, word gets around, and Liz makes it her mission to make Erica's life a living hell. Spike tries to tell Liz to mind her own business, but Liz brings up that she herself was almost aborted because of her mum's abusive boyfriend, hence her hardcore anti-abortion stance. So Liz continues to fuck with Erica until the latter gives her a taste of her own medicine. Not long after this, she meets an 11th grade Irishman named Patrick. At first, Spike's excited about the relationship and goes out with him, but begins to become hesitant. She feels that Patrick won't stick around, that he might view her as easy, and she begins to avoid him at all costs. Eventually, Liz makes Spike face Patrick, and the two are an item for the rest of the 1st season. Presumably, anyway. Near the end of the 1st season, Shane is back, albeit the brain damage having taken its toll.
Dumb jerk! You should be kicked in the head!
And while at first hesitant, Spike works up the nerve to speak to him, and she appears to make peace with him. By the 2nd season, Spike and Patrick have broken up because of their responsibilities with the baby, so he tries to rebound with Liz, which Spike calls out, leading to Liz breaking up with Patrick, and Patrick to storm into the library to find Spike and pin it on her in a kind of weird, overly aggressive manner. Patrick vanishes, we never see him again, one of Degrassi's tricks of the trade, and Spike and Liz are friends again. When Liz's date accidentally awakens her memories of abuse as a kid, Spike tries to be at her side, but she pushes her away until finally confiding in her. When the student Cloyd Tanner kills himself, Spike lashes out and calls what he did selfish, but then later suggests turning the upcoming talent show into a benefit for Cloyd's family, a proposal which is heavily agreed upon. After this, another crucial part of Spike's history comes into play. She reveals she has a crush on Archie Snake Simpson, or Mr. Simpson, or Principal Simpson, whatever you prefer. She gets nervous about asking him to the dance and daydreams of everyone laughing at her before finally finding the courage to do so. However, she overhears that he likes Michelle more, and she's obviously disappointed and tells him that she's not going to the prom after all, but is later seen at the prom in the final episode, dancing with wheels. In the 1992 television movie School's Out, which at the time concluded the Degrassi franchise, Spike works at a 1-hour photo lab with Tessa Campanelli, the girl who Joey Jeremiah quite literally fucked, not just in the sexual sense, but fucked over royally as well. By the end, Spike says she's going to university while Emma is in junior kindergarten, and for many years, this was the end of Spike and Degrassi. Thanks to that lovely thing called exposition, we get to see what Spike's life was between Degrassi High and the Next Generation in the Next Generation. At some point in the early 90s, Shane was institutionalized in Stouffville, Ontario, and Spike takes Emma to the sanatorium to visit him. This one visit doesn't go down well, and fearing for Emma's safety, cuts Shane from their lives altogether. And thanks to this lone memory, Emma believes Shane was a doctor. Later, Spike becomes a hairdresser and buys out her mother's salon, which was only explained in this deleted scene on the Season 1 Next Generation DVD. By now, it's been 10 years. It's the new millennium. Spike is now in her late 20s, Emma is now 12, Snake is now a teacher, and the 10-year reunion of the original class is being held at Degrassi Community School. And like many others have said, this show starts off hardcore. Already in the first episode, Spike, with the aid of Snake, is having to save Emma from an online predator. And it's here we also get a bit of subtle irony.
You don't remember what it's like being 12.
You know nothing what it's like to be 14.
Spike appears in the show's first 9 seasons, but her appearances become more sporadic over time as Emma's class grows up, graduates and moves on. But despite her apparent reputation among some TNG fans for not being there much, she still has some major arcs and other plot lines that stick out. In the second season, we see Spike getting real cozy with Snake, and the two finally get together and start dating, much to the chagrin of Emma. Spike then proposes to Snake, but not long before she's pregnant again. Snake coincidentally makes a comment about not wanting to have children, and this makes the lead up to their wedding chaotic. Spike contemplates an abortion, which Emma blasts. Emma then tells Snake behind Spike's back. Snake gets pissed at Spike before they reconcile, and Spike says this yearbook-worthy quote,
But life doesn't wait for you to get adjusted, Snake. It just happens.
"If I'd graduated, this would have seriously been part of my speech." Eventually, they race to the wedding, still in their casual clothes, and all is well. After the wedding, we see Spike in some situations, such as when Emma's troubled boyfriend Sean Cameron thinks she talked to him like trailer trash, and then we get her first major plotline in the 3rd season. Emma finds Shane, who turned into J-Rock from Trailer Park Boys, in an old school yearbook, and when she tries to bring it up to Spike, she gets defensive. Wanting to know the truth, and with the help of Craig, Emma goes to Stouffville and finds Shane in an institution, revealing that he wasn't a doctor like she had believed from her distorted memory of the sanatorium visit, but a patient. Emma is mad and resents Spike for allegedly putting him in the institution and not telling him, but Craig calls her out on this, saying Spike could probably explain. Emma returns home late, Spike is real pissed, and Snake tries to get her to sit down and talk, but Emma is just as pissed. Later, while Emma's at school, Spike gets a visit from Shane, who got their address from Emma, and who somehow got out unsupervised, and a tense reunion escalates into chaos as Shane has a meltdown, smashes everything around the house, and keeps the phone from Spike. Aka the reason why Spike kept Emma away from him in the first place. She goes into labor, and with the help of Liz as a midwife, she gives birth to a baby boy named Jack. Later on, when Emma's friend Manny gets pregnant, she goes to Spike for advice, and Spike tells her that it's really her choice what she does with the baby, and so Manny has an abortion. From then on, Spike makes some appearances, such as after the infamous Rick shooting, but she wouldn't come to prominence again until season 5, when Emma witnesses Snake making out with the school principal. When Spike finds out, she kicks Snake out of the house and seems to want nothing to do with him again. And to cheer her up, the girls organize some male strippers. except one of them looks like Snake, and Spike realizes that she still loves Snake. After Emma and Manny fail to reconcile the two over a dinner, Snake finds Spike at the shopping mall and sings his way back into Spike's good books, therefore saving their relationship. Spike's last majorish plotline in The Next Generation is when Snake is falsely accused of sexual misconduct by Darcy Edwards, a character dealing with trauma from when she was raped. She briefly leaves with Jack because of Snake's descent into madness because of the whole thing. She does, however, come back, and all is fine, and she's there when Snake takes the last photo of Sean and Emma together, much like how Spike herself did 6 years prior. After this, Spike appears less and less, as Emma's class isn't really needed anymore, and she makes her final appearance in Degrassi Takes Manhattan, when she attends Emma and Spinner's wedding. And that, my friends, is the whole story of Christine Spike Nelson. Now, watching Degrassi, it might not seem like Spike's always that prominent, but when you describe a story by itself with words, you really do see more of it that way. Just as a side note, there was one plot I forgot to mention, which is one where Claire Edwards and Ali Bandari are at the Simpsons residence, and they find what appears to be Spike's vibrator. But this was really a minor plot that didn't contribute to Spike's character development, so it doesn't really need to be talked about. But because it's such an infamous plot in Next Gen and it kind of features Spike, I had to mention it. When Degrassi Junior High came out in 1987, teenage pregnancy hadn't really been tackled the way it was in the show. I mean, obviously this wasn't the first piece of media to ever portray it, but this was a show that followed a pregnant teen character all the way through, showing the stigma and the struggles of being 14 and pregnant. And also thanks to her portrayal of the character, it led Amanda Steptoe to become, for at least a short period, Canada's teen pregnancy spokeswoman. She was mistaken as being actually pregnant, and she would be sent baby clothes and stuffed animals, as well as being asked for advice by other pregnant teens in response. Judging from the amount of contemporary news articles on just her that I've come across when scrolling around newspaper archives, I would call Spike the most popular character of that period. I mean, you'd think that Pat Mastriani, who played Joey, or Stacey Mistijan, who played Caitlin, would have a wealth of contemporary press coverage just about them, considering they literally won awards, but it's like, Spike was the Degrassi character at the time. Of course I could be wrong, after all, I don't have access to every single Degrassi Junior High news article ever created, but it does seem like Amanda did get the most media coverage. And even after the show ended, the pro-choice organization Planned Parenthood chose Amanda to be a spokesperson, and her 37-stop tour of Alberta was again covered quite a bit by the Canadian press. Spike obviously was one of the biggest characters of the show. So why did the writers not look at this and go, oh hey, everyone likes Spike, let's give her a bigger role? After all, they were getting biased towards the end anyway, so what would be the difference? In the late 1990s, a reunion of several original Degrassi cast members, including Spike, took place on the CBC TV show Jonovision, hosted by Jonathan Torrens, aka J-Rock from Trailer Park Boys, aka Next Gen Shane. In Degrassi Junior High, writer Yan Moore had an idea. He and Linda Schuyler had been throwing around ideas for a new teen show named Ready, Willing and Wired when Yan Moore came to the realization that Emma would be in junior high by now. This led them to retool their ideas into a new Degrassi series for the new millennium, and so Spike birthed not just Emma, but the Degrassi you're familiar with today. Now that we've finished recapping Spike's entire existence in the Degrassi universe, now I'm at the point where I can finally offer my takes on the character, starting with an attempt to explain what her character even is. First of all, her background. Spike's background is only briefly touched upon. In its slate, we see that she lives in an apartment complex alone with her mum, who runs a salon that does pretty decently. We hear that Spike was born when her mum was 17.
I was 17 when I had this one.
It's pretty clear there's no father figure, and it appears that he might have abandoned them.
Typical male wants to get off scot-free.
I just have a feeling there's a history of this. However, the mum disappears after season 3, and we only see Spike's home life once more as a backdrop for Liz confiding her traumatic experiences. Now onto her personality. Honestly, to me, Spike exemplifies the chaotic good type. She's an individualist who's true to herself. She's kind of compassionate, but she has no regard for what people expect her to be and act, an attitude reinforced by her struggles and treatment by those around her. And as such, her behaviour is not every Degrassi fan's cup of tea. A lot of her criticism is in regards to her attitude towards Shane. are talking about Shane McKay. Because of his accident and the backstory behind it, Shane is seen as a tragic figure. He was a boy who got caught up in a pregnancy situation, faced pressure from his own parents, and ultimately was peer pressured into doing drugs and altering the course of his life forever. However, I think this has put a bad light on Spike. Those who dislike her commonly cite her behavior towards Shane throughout the pregnancy. But let's look at it from Spike's point of view. He didn't tell his parents about Spike's pregnancy for months. He didn't take the responsibility experiment seriously and try getting out of it. His parents tried putting her in a home. He got to stay without a problem when Spike was kicked out, and he was put away in summer camp when Emma was born. The thing is, this doesn't make Shane a bad person either. Yes, he tried to step up to the plate even when his parents were against him, and he even thought of giving Spike child support out of his own free will. In fact, I don't think Spike's anger is just solely towards him. It's towards the entire system that favored him. The people who look down on her. We have a habit of hurting others and then acting like their backlash was unjustified and mean and rude, forgetting how we provoked them in the first place. It's a more bigger social version of when a kid keeps taunting you in school, you say one thing back and they act like you were the instigator. What a lot of people forget is that Spike is the one with the baby. She's the mother. She spent 9 months with an entirely new person growing inside her. Her whininess and annoyingness is really just a backlash towards the way she was betrayed by Shane early on, and the way she was treated throughout. Being kicked out because she allegedly made the school look bad. The gossiping, everything.
And now we introduce the segment, messages that portray Spike in the wrong when actually you could see where she's coming from. Shit, I just stole a joke from You Got Cat, music and all. Oh well.
Now this is a scene that really bugged me, or at least the message that I'm getting from it. On the surface, it's a minor scene that makes perfect sense. Spike's giving up on herself, teacher gives her a bit of tough love to snap her out of it. But honestly, the message comes off as a bit of a guilt trip.
At least you can have a baby. Not all of us are that lucky, you know.
Of course, Spike yells out that she wished she never had Emma.
Emma, I wish I'd never had her. If it wasn't for her, none of this would be happening.
Was what she said bad? No fucking shit. But with the context, we all know very well she never truly meant that. It's not something to really pin on her. And I think Miss Avery's way of handling this situation was just fucking wrong. It implies that Spike's struggles don't matter and that she has no right to complain because at least she's capable of reproduction in the first place, and I think that's a really dumb message. It's like saying that a guy with
Rectal
dysfunction has no right to complain about it because at least he has a fucking dick. Look, I get Avery's message here. She wants Spike to do well and to not become a mere statistic. For fuck's sake. She wants Spike to do well and to not become a mere statistic. It still gives her no right to project on Spike, someone going through a different kind of problem other than her own. This is similar to the fallacy of relative privation, otherwise known as the appeal to worse problems fallacy. This is a fallacy in which an argument or complaint is rejected with the rebuttal that others have it worse. And honestly, that's what this scene represents to me. This is what Miss Avery's dialogue represents to me.
At least you can have a baby.
Spike isn't allowed to complain about her problems as a teenage mother, because at least she's able to be a mother. So while the message of the scene was well-meaning, in execution, it's a total fucking guilt trip and a fallacy. Full stop. Miss Avery, you mean well, but shut the fuck up! This is a scene that we touched upon during the recap, but I'm going to give my thoughts on it. So as before, the backstory of this scene is that Spike breaks up with Patrick, Liz becomes Patrick's rebound, Spike thinks it's stupid, Liz breaks up with Patrick, and we're at the library, or resource center, where we are now. Patrick immediately confronts Spike, and his hovering and leaning action is on point here. This whole scene is just dumb, and it's all on Patrick. Spike, as much as you'd like to think, didn't contribute to this dumbness. For one, Patrick here is kind of stupid for choosing his ex's best friend as a rebound, let alone the whole rebound thing at all in the first place. And two, Spike never meddled with their relationship as Patrick claims.
And I don't like you meddling, and I don't like you dictating who I can or cannot go out with.
I mean, yeah, sure, Spike didn't approve of this happening, but did she physically force Liz to walk up to Patrick and break it up? No, Liz did that out of respect for her friend. So Patrick is just fucking wrong in this scene, and he ends it with one of the stupidest attempts at a burn ever uttered on Canadian television.
You may be a mother, but you've got a lot of growing up to do.
I mean, he looks so confident, his face is just like, I'm a fucking genius saying this to Christine. I mean, some might view it as some epic satisfying burn that destroyed the annoying, bitchy Spike, but it's just dumb. And Spike's face is just like, do the words fuck off mean anything to you?
Alright, Spike, I've got a lot of growing up to do.
Spike's biggest problem as a character is what I'd like to call the Repco syndrome. When Linda Scarler and Kit Hood developed Degrassi Junior High, they formed a repertory company which was nicknamed the Repco. It consisted of 65 kids whose presence could serve all kinds of purposes, whether it be an extra, a minor character, or a main character. Their system was so that there wasn't exactly a fixed cast of main characters, and this is evident by how the opening sequence doesn't list names, and how the end credit cast listings are different every episode based on who was relevant. Major characters could just be extras, while extras could be major characters, which I guess was to avoid bias, although it arguably happened regardless. The downfall of this though is that none of the original characters, especially the more arguably interesting ones, aren't given much depth, aside from maybe Wheels and a few others. Spike happens to suffer from this a lot, as while we do touch on her home life a little bit, we don't really get to see what she does, how she lives, what her background really is outside of what we see at school. However, I believe the biggest effects of this syndrome on Spike are most evident in School's Out. In the movie, we see Spike sparingly. She works at a 1-hour photo place with Tessa Campanelli, and she's at Alexa and Simon's wedding, but that's it. And this wasn't a matter of Amanda Steptoe not being available or wanting to be there.
School's Out.
Yeah, I fucking hate that. How many scenes am I in that? Come on.
Not many.
Not too much.
I was so pissed off that I wasn't in that. Like, I begged to be at that party because I think I was like 20 at the time, living on my own with no money. Couldn't even pay my rent, and then I'm not even in it. I was so fucking mad.
I think it would have been great to see Spike have at least a little drama in the movie. Like if they had hindsight, maybe have this flashback from Next Gen. But she gets nothing, she's just there, and that is such a shame. Now, a common criticism of Spike is that the actress who plays her was bad. I've seen the words cringe and horrid like being thrown around, and I think that's a bit harsh. I mean, yeah, no shit, her acting isn't 100% top tier Hollywood Broadway, but...
Mom, I'm pregnant.
One of the things about Degrassi Junior High is that they cast local kids, not actors. Linda Skylar and Kit Hood didn't want professionals. That's why the flyers read no experience required. And since we're talking about a punk character, I think I can easily compare this to the 3 chords and the truth mentality. While this term isn't solely applicable to punk rock, that genre partially came out of the idea that anybody could learn a few chords and form a band. They didn't need a PhD in guitar playing to create music that had a message. And with that comparison, Degrassi Junior High was the punk rock of teenage television. It was a TV show that had something to say, and that didn't care about being polished and well produced. Linda Skylar and Kit Hood were kind of like the Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren of Canadian TV. So where does that leave Amanda? Well, the way her acting is perceived compared to how it actually is reminiscent of the public perception of the Sex Pistols. Now, this sounds ridiculous and far-fetched, but hear me out. They were the first major British punk band, and they get a lot of flack for being allegedly shitty musicians, when in reality, they weren't even that bad, especially when Glenn Matlock was in the band. And it's the same with Amanda's acting. From people's comments, you think that she was a hopeless fuck, but it's not even that bad. Here are a few examples. In It's Late, she looks genuinely scared and vulnerable. In Egbert, you can feel her anger at Shane for being untrustworthy. In Bye Bye Junior High, she looks genuinely resentful of Emma. And look, if you do dislike her acting, then that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Nearly none of the original Degrassi actors were top-tier Hollywood actors. The context matters. Spike's been my favorite Degrassi character for a while now, and she deserved much better. It would have been easy to just say she wasn't much of a character and call it a day. But that's not the point. Not everybody's gonna like Spike and her behavior, and that's the way it is. Everything in the entire world has detractors, some more than others. But I think that most criticisms of Spike don't really factor in the social implications of the problems that she was dealing with. It's not as simple as whether she was just unnecessarily rude to Shane. The same when she left Snake when he was being accused of sexual misconduct by Darcy. It's not as simple as she deserted Snake. She didn't bail out on Snake with the sole purpose of leaving him in the dust. She was burnt out, coming off from him cheating not that long prior, and her life was probably just as much under scrutiny as Snake's. People are so obsessed with black and white that they're blind to the shades of grey in between. And that's a sentiment that could be applied to 95% of Degrassi characters. Spike isn't 100% right by any means, and you can disagree with things she does, but she's not wrong either. And that's the end of my Spike retrospective. In all honesty, this video wasn't really meant to achieve a specific outcome. I simply just had a lot to say about Spike, and so I convey my opinions through one big video. There'll be a Google Doc in the description that contains all my sources, as well as playlists of the original Degrassi show, and other video essays and retrospectives that influence this video, which by the way, making this video was fucking difficult. Not only am I a huge procrastinator, my computer nearly died with all my work on it, my scroll wheel was broken at the start of making it, so it nearly demotivated me from editing because it was hard. My state has been dealing with COVID waves and lockdowns. But whatever it takes, I know I can make it through, and I did, because you're sitting here watching this right now. On that note, thanks for watching. If you like this video, drop a like and subscribe. Long live Spike and Amanda Steptoe.